Hello, my name is Sigita and this will be an introduction to Adobe Illustrator. In this tutorial I'll show you around Illustrator workspace, what the different tools are available to you, what panels you have, and what are the most useful ones to start with in Illustrator. To start, I will create a new file, so I can do either go to File, New, or I can just press Ctrl N on my keyboard. If you're using a Mac, that would be a Command N. So just as a note, in this tutorial I'm using a Windows computer, so if I'm saying Control and something for a shortcut, make sure that on the Mac that would be a command instead of Control. I'll try to say it again, but as I do, but if I forget, then please make a note of that. So you will see this window when you open a new document, and it is asking you to set up the kind of page you would like. Illustrator already offers you some preset pages. Obviously you can always just create your own. I'll choose an A4 page for this. And here I have the width and height in millimeters. You can also do it in pixels, which is very useful if you're preparing something for a specific screen size, because screens are always measured in pixels. I'll do it in portrait orientation. It's also asking me how many artboards I want. I'll start with one and I'll show you how to add more if you need to. And the color mode here, I will actually change this to RGB, because CMYK would be if I were to prepare something for print, whereas RGB is more suitable for digital submissions. There's more settings if you need to set something specific. I won't go into this in detail, but know it's there in case you need it. And I will create a new file. Alright, so what we have here now is my first page that I have created, and this is in Illustrator it's called an artboard, and you can have multiple artboards in one document. So this tool here on the left, hope you can see it. So here you can see the artboard tool. If you click on it, you will see that it activates your artboard. You can see this is artboard 1. It's also useful if you have multiple ones and you want to export a specific one. It will it will just tell you which one it is, so you can also rename them in case you need to. And if I wanted to add more artboards, I'll just zoom out. So I'm using Control and minus to zoom out, or you can just use the zoom tool. And when I press spacebar and click and drag, I can pan around my page, which is also a very useful tool. So here I can, first of all, I can just change the width and height of my artboard. If I decide I want it bigger, smaller, change to a different kind of layout. I can also change the orientation. However, so if I have something drawn on my page, this will not rotate stuff on my page, it will just change the proportions of the board itself. And I can create new ones, so if I click on new, you'll see it allows me to add another one. If I wanted to, I'll use Ctrl Z to go back, because at the moment I will only be using one. There are situations when you would want to use more than one, however, to start with it's easier to use one, especially as if you're not that experienced with using layers in different setups, you might end up accidentally changing something on one layer and changing it on the others. So, sorry, on one artboard and then accidentally changing it on the others. So I'll just start with one. So what we have here is our tools on the left hand side, and similarly as in other Adobe software, if you click onto the tools, you will see that you can, the stuff on the top of your toolbar changes depending on what options you have chosen. So if I choose type tool, you will see that additional options appear for the font size and so on. So we have two selection tools here. One is the selection tool, and shortcut is letter V on your keyboard, and the other one is a direct selection tool, which is shortcut is A. The difference is so I'll draw a shape quickly to demonstrate. If I have chosen and I'll color it in some other color. So if I have chosen my selection tool, if I click onto the shape, I will drag it around the entire shape, and if I choose the corners, I'll be able to rescale it. And there are some other options in newer versions of Illustrator, so this one is automatically filleting the shape if I need to, and this is the selection tool. However, if I choose the direct selection tool, the shortcut is letter A. This one allows me to select certain elements of my drawn shape. So instead of choosing so I can obviously choose the whole thing as well if I just click on it in the middle. But if I click on the specific corner, it will allow me to just drag around this particular corner. Or if I click on an edge, it will allow me to move the edge. And also with this one, I can just select this corner, and if I hit delete on my keyboard, it will delete it, and now I only have, as you see, I have two edges and it's filled with red. However, there's no edge here because I haven't drawn it. So I'll go back. Another thing you can do with your direct selection tool, you can change your anchor points from being sort of sharp square ones to rounded ones, and you just click it here on convert to smooth, or you can convert it back to like a sharp corner without the smoothing. And then you have your control tools, and you can edit corners and lines by using your direct selection tool. So if I went back to normal selection tool or the basic selection tool, you will see that I can't select the particular anchor point. Instead, I can move the whole shape around, and I can scale it and do that kind of basic manipulations with it. What else I have on the top toolbar here is, so obviously the fill color and the stroke color, so I can change them here. I can change the stroke weight to make it thicker, and I can choose my stroke type, and I can also use some brushes, which I will talk about later on. At the moment, I'll move down to other tools. I'll just use the ones that that are the more commonly used ones for basic drawing diagrams, and obviously I encourage you to explore more, as you will obviously learn and maybe find something that's useful for your work. The next one I will talk about is the pen tool. So the shortcut is letter P, and what this allows you to do is draw lines as polylines, so like connected lines. And as you can see, as I click on the screen, it draws one continuous line, and it has a fill. Just hit enter and select this shape here, and I'll actually remove the fill because otherwise it gets a bit confusing. So as you saw, if you use the pen tool and you just click on the screen, it draws it with the sort of like sharp edges. Whereas if you click and if you drag your pen tool as you click onto your screen, you see that it adds those smoothing anchor points, and you can create lines which are smoother, which might be useful for some specific things. I'll delete this now, and as similarly as with the basic shapes, you can always convert your anchor points to one or the other. So in this one, if I wanted to convert those anchor points from the sharp ones to the smooth ones, I'll go to my direct selection tool. I will drag and select those particular anchor points, and if you look closely, you will see that the ones that are selected are highlighted blue, and the ones that are not selected are highlighted, are not highlighted blue, they're just blue with a white center. And I click here to convert, and you see that this line has been converted to smooth angles. Alright, so next what we have here is under your pen tool. If you press and hold it, you will see that there are options to add or delete anchor points. So if I just start with my normal pen tool, and I will just draw some sort of a line. Now if I go into adding or deleting anchor points, as you can see, the shortcuts are plus or minus on your keyboard, which are really useful to remember, just because it will make your life easier and make your workflow much faster if you learn to use shortcuts. So if I use the plus one, you can see as I click on my path, I'm adding new points. And now if I switch to direct selection tool, so shortcut A, I can click on these points and drag them around. Similarly, if I went with the minus, so deleting anchor points, I can just click on the points I want to delete and they will be deleted. We also have tool here for drawing lines. So this is just for so 2-point lines, straight line segments, which you can draw on your sheet. And you can, so if I'll just delete this all just so I have more clear space. So if, for example, I drew lines which I then wanted to connect, you can also do that. So I've drawn one line and I will draw another one. So at the moment what you can see, I have two separate lines. However, if I select them both and I do Ctrl J as a shortcut on my keyboard, I have connected these two lines. So now it's a polyline, similarly as you would have them on AutoCAD, and it's a connected line. Obviously, I can join lines that have more than one segments, and you can also join lines which are not necessarily not all anchor points are connected, but if I do it now, I do Ctrl J, you will see that Illustrator adds lines in between them. And of course, this is not always as easy, because the more complex your drawing gets, the more chances are that it will translate the start and end points of your lines differently. Alright, so going forward we have Type tool. So this allows you to either click and type as your text, or you can also click on the Type tool and you can draw a shape. So this would be my paragraph, and Illustrator automatically fills it with some placeholder text. So it's the basic text in Latin that it similar to the one that InDesign does. And you can then manipulate the text box. The good thing is, in newer versions of Illustrator, so if you have an older one, you might not have this still, you can always convert between the two. So if I click on this box and actually want this to be a continuous type tool, I go under Type and select Convert to Point Type. And what it does now, instead of having it as a box that I can manipulate, this actually only contains text without the box. Similarly as this one here, if I stretch it, I'm stretching the entire text. And if, for example, I wanted to make this bigger, to add more text in it, I can always just click in and keep typing, or I can go under Type and convert to Area Type, and now I can make this text box bigger if I needed to, for example, paste some text into it or type a description of something. Aside from those, there's also area type tools and type in the path tools. So if I have drawn, let's say, a more complex shape like this, I'll just change the color to something else, and I go into area type tool and I can click into the area. And so to add, to add text inside this shape I've drawn, if you click inside of it, you'll get an error message. So you need to click onto the path, itself. And if I click it here, you will see it fills with the placeholder text. And obviously, it can be any kind of shape, which is quite useful for specific types of diagrams. And you also have options for type on the path, vertical type, and multiple other ones. So the type on the path tool is actually quite handy. So what I'll do here, I'll draw a path and change it to be a path, and then I will choose my type in the path tool, and I will click on my path and you will see that the text appears onto the path, which again is a very useful tool. And the good thing is that even once I've used it for typing, I can always go into using my direct selection tool. I can actually still edit my path so the text remains on it. As you can see here, I'm dragging it around and the text is sort of like linked to that particular path, so it's all editable. Alright, what do we have next? So here we have our drawing tools, so rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, and flare tool. So with the rectangle, it's the most basic one. You click it here and you just draw on your screen the shape you want, or if you have specific measurements in mind, you just click on the screen and it will ask you to specify the width and the height of the shape you're drawing. And then you can select it with your selection tool, and you can easily change the fill color and the stroke color of your shape. With other shapes, so for example with the polygon tool, if it has a default one, which I think is a hexagon, but you can also just click on the screen and it will ask you how many sides you want. So if instead of a hexagon I wanted, let's say, an octagon, I'll type in 8 and I will get my 8 corner octagon shape. And similarly as in other software, if you're drawing, if you just draw a shape on screen, it starts from a corner and it drags it the way you want. If you press down Shift on your keyboard, it will do it at constrained proportions. So for example, a circle will be a perfect round circle rather than an ellipse. And if you do the same for rectangle tool, it will draw a square. And if you draw and press Shift and also press Alt, or just press Alt, what it does is, instead of drawing it from the corner, it draws it from the center. And this is obviously great if you want to, for when you want to line stuff. So for example, I draw this one and I would like to draw now a new shape on top of it in, I'll just do it in a different color. So I'll go for the same shape. You'll see that the guides sort of like auto align, and I click on it, I press Alt, and I just stretch it out, and my two circles are perfectly aligned and I don't need to do another step by aligning them. Going back to drawing tools, there is under the line segment there's actually other options such as an arc, a spiral, a grid tool, or a polar grid tool, which are also quite useful for quickly drawing diagrams and other elements. And you can also just click on the screen and then you can obviously customize particular components of your drawing shapes. So other tools we have here are the brush tools. So with the paintbrush tool you can use it similarly as you would use pen tool, but it automatically applies the brush effect. So if we select this shape that we have just drawn with the brush, and we can go down here and select our brush libraries, and you will see that there are some preset types of brushes that Illustrator has inbuilt, which applies specific effects. So if I go into, let's say, artistic ones and calligraphy brushes, and you can click on the type of brush and you'll see that it applies this particular effect. Or let's do, what can we try? Special arrows. So here you'll see this just applies the front and the back of a specific type of arrow. Even does a color, which is a quick way to add options to your some effects to your drawings. As you can see here, there's all kinds of options available to you, and depending on the angles of your line, they might be quite handy. Okay, I'll close this now. Alright, so we've gone through the brushes. There's also the blob brush tool. And so what the blob brush does is, instead of drawing a line, it actually draws the shape. So as you see here, if I go back to it and I draw what appears to be a line, it is actually a fill, so I can actually scale it up and down, and I can edit corners and options of it, and it's actually it's a fill rather than being a stroke, which again can be a very useful option to use. And if you go back to paintbrush, that just draws a line. So if I select the line, just go back to using as a brush stroke. So this one is obviously it's a line rather than being a shape, and you can see that it's not outlined, it just has the points between which the line has been constructed. There are some other tools, such as the eraser tool and the scissors and knife tool, which work by editing your vector shapes into well, however it reads them. So of course, for example, here, as you can see, I have my circle shape. If I use the eraser, it will automatically split it in half, and now if I select them, you can see these are two separate halves, and I can move them around independently on one another. The knife tool does a similar thing, but instead of erasing the bit in between, it just cuts things in. I'm sorry, I have selected the wrong tool. So if it just cuts your shape into two, so now you can see that I have my two segments, but it doesn't have any gap in between. And scissors tool, which allows you to cut things at specific points. So if I were to cut this line, for example, you will see that then when I go into my selection tool, I can actually select my line segments separately, and they have been cut. So what else we have here is the rotate tool, reflect tool, which you can also access differently, scaling tools, and other options which are probably easiest to test yourself to see what they actually do and then see how you can use them. An interesting one here is the width tool, and with width tool you can, I'll show you in a sec. I'll just delete what I have here, and I'll scale up this shape here. So with the width tool, you can select a line, and it will widen that. Path from the point you have selected. So you can see here I have created, added sort of like a thickness to my lines, and you can see it does it between the 2 points. So because I had some other points here, it only does it for that segment. And if I do it for this side, yeah, it does it for the segments I've selected. But if I only had the shape, which is, I'll do a circle. And now if I use the width tool, I select a segment, and it will add a thickness to the line and make a nice sort of almost like a three-dimensional shadow kind of effect for your shapes and drawings. So there's more tools which again you can explore as you'd like. A couple more I would like to draw your attention to. There is the gradient tool, which allows you to add gradients to shapes. If I select it here, I will. Okay, where is it? So the gradient. I'll go to gradient options, and I will choose my gradient, and then I can change my colors in the gradients panel, which I will talk about in a second. In the second part of this video. So here I have created a quick gradient, infill in my shape. Right. Then there is the blend tool, which is quite an interesting tool to use for some graphics. And I'll show you what it does. So I'll just change this to let's do a purple shape, and I'll do no fill, and I'll draw a little round circle. And I will do a rectangle now on this side of my page, and I will change the color of my rectangle to it's the green. So if I select these two and I click on blend, it creates So I clicked on blend, and then I clicked on the two objects from sort of like 1 to 2, and it basically creates a series of shapes which transform from being this shape to this shape. And if I go into object blend and blend options, I can choose, instead of smooth color, I will do specified steps. I'll click preview, and I will say I want 5 steps. So as you can see here, from this shape I get into my square shape, and it does the little transitions in between. This is fine. And the cool thing is that I can click into my shapes, and I can actually, if I make this one bigger, it will adjust the blend. There's loads of uses for it, and the one I have actually found quite useful for myself is also using this to build up a color scheme. So if I wanted to make nice, so like mixed colors, I could just choose then a particular ones, and then add them to my color palette and so on. And you can do it from shapes that are the same size. So just click out. So if I have the same exact shapes and I move them around, and then I change colors. So this, let's say, this will be white, and this one I will do, no, it's orange. And I choose blend, and I click on this one, to my white one, and back to my purple one. As you will see, it creates the same exact effect with the hundreds of little steps and shapes. You zoom in, you can see that it's not like a smooth gradient. Instead it's steps, and I will go into blend options, and I will do steps again. I will do 5 steps in between, and you can see now I have created all these little rectangular shapes. And if I want to now use them as separate shapes rather than having it as a line, as a blend, because if I still have it as a blend, as I edit it, it does edit it all together. Whereas if I wanted to use all these shapes separately, I would select it with my selection tool and go into Object, Blend, and Expand. And now I have created, I have a group which of those shapes, which are all each of the blended colors, and of course I can then use them for something that I would like. So there's a couple more tools, such as a graph tool, where you can actually add data and create graphs, or you can get data from, for example, Excel, and then create types of graphs. And some other options. So the panning tool, which, as I said, the shortcut is the spacebar. So if you just press this, if I'm in another tool and I press down spacebar, I can move my drawing around. And similar with the zoom tool, you can just zoom in, and if you press Alt or Option key, you can zoom out of the specific parts of your drawing. So now I will move on to the panels on the right hand side. You might see them in a slightly different arrangement, something like this. So I tend to just keep them hidden, because it allows me more drawing space on actual drawing. But yeah, you can always just open them up to see what is what. So I'll draw a shape, select some colors for it. So here, with my shape selected, I can see my swatches, which is basically the same thing as I have up here, but this is more expanded, and I can easily change the color. I have my brushes, which is again the same thing as I have up here. I have symbols, which you can use as well. And I have my stroke options, which are actually quite a lot of options for how I want my strokes to perform. So from changing the weight of the stroke, so that is the thickness, to the type of cap, which is not going to make much difference in the closed shape. However, if I had, for example, a stroke like this, and then I chose cap, you can see that, if I zoom in, you can see the different type of cap will change how the end of the stroke behaves. And if I have one which is made up of multiple steps, like here, and I change my Okay, I change my cap, and then I can change my corners, and you will see that the actual corners go from sharp to slightly filleted corners, depending on which one you specify. And then in a shape which is a closed shape, like this rectangular shape here, you can choose where the stroke is aligned. So at the moment the stroke, as you can see, my actual boundary of the shape is around, sort of like in the middle of the red bit. But if I changed it to the outside, so you will see that the stroke actually goes inside the shape, and if I do it, sorry, that was the inside. If I do it on the outside, the stroke actually appears on the outside of the shape. This comes in very useful when you are working with complex drawings, with things layering up on top of one another. You can control where your strokes actually appear here. And you can also use dashed lines. The default is, I believe, 12 by 12, so that is how long the dash is, then how long the gap is, and I can change it to, let's say, 3, 3, 3, and 5, and something else, and you will see that it creates the pattern of the dash. Now just move to the inside. Actually, this does not look particularly nice. I'll do 3, 4, 45, fine, 6, and 7. And you can see that it sort of creates this step of there is the 3, the 45, the 6, and the 7 all the way around, and I can align it the way I need to. I'll just go back to normal line. And alright, so next we have the gradient, which I already slightly demonstrated before. If you click on the shape and I want to apply the gradient, I'll click here, and you can see the gradient is applied. If I click on the arrow, there is some default set gradients that we have in Illustrator, but you can set your own. And this one here, if I click onto the color, I can choose one from my swatches, and you can also change, just click and drag into your little gradient bar, new colors, and you can change where and how these colors transition from one to another. And the important thing to note is that here and also here, you see that the fill is on top. So that means whatever I'm doing now with changing the colors and so on, it affects the fill. If I want to do it onto the stroke, I can click on this little swap between fill and stroke. No, sorry, that was actually not what I wanted. So, sorry. So the swatch, this just swaps them around, so the fill color goes to the stroke and back. If I actually wanted to now work with my fill, with my stroke, I click on it, and whichever one is on top, that's the one I'm working. So if I click on my stroke, you see that comes on top, and if I change the color of it, you will see that the color changes in my drawing. And the same for the gradient. If I now click on gradient, you will see that my my stroke is has the gradient rather than the fill itself. Alright, so next things we have here, I'll just close it up a little bit. There's obviously other tools you can explore. I'll go to the layers because that is a very important one. Similarly as in Photoshop, you can use layers in Illustrator, and in more complex drawings it's I would advise to do it. So because now everything is in one layer, so if I have stuff overlapping and I'm trying to select things on top or underneath something, it's quite hard to do it. And also if I want to change the order of stuff, I would need to go right click, arrange and bring to front and so on. However, let's say if I draw, okay, I'll leave it in this layer, and if I create a new layer, just by hitting here, create a new layer, and then I draw more shapes on this particular layer, just do quite a few. What happens is I can actually lock the layer underneath, and now if I go to Control A, select all, you will see that I've only selected the stuff that is on my top layer. And if I'm working in a complex drawing, I can even hide the stuff underneath, so I'm only working on what's important. So if I created a new one, and let's say I want to do text boxes, lock this one, and then I'll create a text box, and I realize it's quite hard to see what is written and arrange it, I can just switch off the one underneath, and I can just work with the text separately. This also is great for when you're doing something such as a diagram, and you're not quite sure which version looks better. You can always just do one, do the other, and compare the two by switching on and off layers. So always remember to use them, and that will make your workflow more efficient. And then easily you can also drag layers from top to the bottom, and if I drag this text layer, for example, now underneath the layer 2, you will see that it goes to the back, and if I highlight this one, you will see that this is now whichever layer drag on top is on top, and so on. Alright, I'll select all and delete them. And you can also double click on the layers to change the names of them, so once you have more than probably 3 or 4, it might be much easier for you to use the correct names on what is actually on the layer, just so when you have to open the drawing after a couple days or weeks of not looking at it, you can still understand what is where and the organization of how you have done it. So we also have stuff like character tools and paragraph tools. So if you have bits of text, you can edit your fonts and so on. And the align tools, which are really quite powerful in arranging stuff around your drawings. So for example, if I had rectangular shapes, now I'll just do them as strokes, and I'll make them quite big. So here I'll just draw random bits of random shapes, and now if I wanted to align them, I select them all, and if I go here, I select the line to not the selection, I'll actually align them to the artboard, hit the middle, and it aligns them vertically, and if I hit this again, it aligns them horizontally, and it's perfectly aligned. What we can also do is make even distributions between the shapes. We can line them all to one side, space them out the way we want them. This is probably not really telling much, but if we had a shape that is the same, and if I just create multiples and now drag them down here, I'll explain to you how I did the shortcuts in a second. And then I had some of them which were completely moved out, and I decided I want them to all to line. I just select the line, I click on the one I want to align them to, and click align, and it will all come back into place. And then I see that these are off this direction, so I just hit here, and just hit align, and they're all now nice and straight. And that is much easier than, oh, the wrong one. It is much easier than if I wanted to do it manually, just by sort of trying to drag them and like line them where they are, where they're not. Also, if in case you're not seeing those smart guides, you see as I moved around, it sort of like tries to snap it to stuff. You need to go under View, and it is View and Smart Guides. So this should be ticked. So if you're not seeing any of that, make sure this is ticked here. Also, similarly as in, the same as in InDesign and Photoshop, we can use rulers. So if I hit Ctrl R, you'll see the rules appear. So I can drag these down and use them as my guides for my pages if I'm drawing something and I want to make sure stuff is snapping to a certain grid. So here I have them, and I can just go under View, Guides, and I will just clear them for now. So there's a couple of really useful shortcuts that I would like to show you. The first one is just Alt and drag. So if I want to copy something, you can of course just do Ctrl C and Ctrl V. But if I just want to make multiples of the same thing, much quicker and easier way to do it is to press Alt key on your keyboard. You press it and you click on the thing you want to copy and you just drag. And as in other software, if you press Shift as you drag, it will constrain it to the 90-degree angles. And another very useful shortcut is Control D. So at first, and what it does is it repeats the previous thing you did. So I'll show you quickly what it means. If you Alt and drag at a certain distance, and now if I do Control D, you will see that it repeats the same exact step. So I don't need to drag and copy all of these boxes manually. I can just do it like this, and they already are spaced the perfect even distance apart. Alternatively, if you didn't do that, if I, for example, just drag them randomly and then I wanted to space them out, what I can do is I can select it here and just do the spacing is now aligned to the artboard. I actually want to do it to selection, and I just click it and it's distributed evenly, which is very useful. Alright, so what else we have? Yeah, we have the tracing, image trace, which I am demonstrating in a video on Photoshop, so that's at the end of video 0702. I'll quickly demonstrate this here as well. So what image trace does, it takes a vector image, so like this one here, which is quite large, which I used in the previous tutorial as well. And as you can see, this is a JPEG, which is so it's a pixel-based image, a photo of a sketch. And image trace actually allows me to trace it, to convert it into vector. So Illustrator will look into it, it will analyze it, and it will try and extract fills and shapes based on what you have in your drawing. So if I do it here, I'll do it as a sketched art preset. You can do it on photos, on any kind of sketches. I think it's very useful for example, if you have quick little diagrams that you have drawn on in your notebook and you actually want to overlay them on top of something else. This is a very great way to make them digitized and smoothen them out a little bit, and also then allow you to manipulate them further into like digital context. So I'll go into advanced. So as you can see, it hasn't done it perfectly. First of all, I want to make sure I ignore white because I only want the black lines. And I want to create fills rather than strokes, but in some drawings you might do the opposite. And I don't quite like this lack of detail, so I'll just increase the threshold here. It's a bit of a learn by trying, because I can't tell you the perfect settings for every single thing, but so like the more you do it, the more likely you are to just learn what is what. So yeah, and as you see now, with increased threshold, I get way more detail. I basically get the drawing as it was drawn. So I'm quite happy with this. I'll drag this back into this panel. And I'll hit expand on here. So expand just allows me now to use it in Illustrator. It is all now grouped, which is can be good, cannot be good. I'll just ungroup it by Ctrl-Shift-G. And for example, now if I wanted to change the color of this particular window or some other detail, I can just click on it and change the color. And if I'll create a new layer. Actually, I have layers already. I'll just go into a different layer. I'll lock this one up. So if I made, if I created something underneath, you can see that my drawing is on the background. So this is all Illustrator, and I can also edit it if I zoom in. So I'll go here, and if, for example, I would like to edit some of these details, to unlock it first, you will see that this is all like a Illustrator shape. So if I hit A, so my direct selection tool, you can see all the anchor points, and it allows me great editability of oh, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. So if I click on specific anchor points, I can always just drag them around, delete them, smoothen them out, do all kinds of things, which is great for digitizing content that is drawn on paper. And I'll finish this Illustrator introduction here. I will have a couple more videos which show some workflows for specific type of things you might want to do or draw in Illustrator, so check those out. And yeah, I hope you learned something, and I hope this was really useful for you.